They said the forest whispered if you stood still long enough. Some folks claimed they heard voices, weeping, whispering, begging. Others scoffed, until they disappeared too. When Nora Hastings returned to Grief Hollow after 20 years, she didn't come for the legends. She came because her sister's body had just been found, buried under an uprooted pine tree, clutching a silver locket Nora hadn't seen since the night she fled town. The locket was hers. She drove the winding back roads in silence, headlights slicing through the fog like knives. The trees on either side of the road leaned inward as if eavesdropping. The town hadn't changed much, still a cluster of moss-choked houses, a diner with flickering neon, and a gas station with one working pump. The only real change was the silence. It had gotten louder. At the edge of the woods, the old family home sagged under years of rot and grief. Nora parked the car and stared at it. The porch swing still creaked with the wind. She could almost hear her father's boots on the steps, her sister Lena's laughter echoing from the upstairs window. Except Lena was dead now, and her laughter had long since turned into screams. When Nora stepped inside, the air turned heavy, like the house was holding its breath. The floorboards groaned. The wallpaper peeled in long, curled strips. Dust coated every surface. And yet, there was a fresh smell. Pine, sap, dirt. Something had been inside recently. She set her bag down and walked through the house room by room, stopping in the hallway outside her old bedroom. The door was closed, but from inside, she heard a muffled sound, like a whisper behind a wall. She opened the door slowly. Her room looked untouched, as if she'd never left. The bed was made. Her stuffed bear, missing one eye, sat upright on the pillow. But the air was colder here, biting at her skin. Then she saw it. Scratched into the wall above the headboard were the words, "I remember you." Nora stared at the wall, fingers trembling. She hadn't written that. She hadn't been back here since she was 12. But the words were carved into the paint with something sharp, like a blade or a claw. She stepped back, heart thumping. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. One new message. No number. Just the words. "Under the tree. You left her there." She dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor, but didn't break. Her pulse roared in her ears. The tree. The one in the forest behind the house. 20 years ago, Lena had begged her to come into the woods. So there was something she wanted to show Nora. Something beautiful. Nora had followed. It had been foggy then, too. They never found their way back together. Nora had run, tears streaming, chased by whispers and flickering shadows. Lena never came out. They told her she'd imagined it all. That grief and shock had warped her memory. But she never forgot the sound of Lena screaming. Now Lena was dead, found beneath a tree that had rotted from the inside out. Nora stepped outside. The forest loomed, an ancient wall of pine and black oak. Fog twisted around the roots like fingers pulling her in. She walked toward the old path, flashlight beam bobbing, breath puffing in the cold. Every step seemed louder. The silence between the trees wasn't empty. It was packed with something waiting. Then she saw it. The tree. Tall, twisted, split at the base where it had fallen. Fresh earth mounded at its roots. Nora knelt. Her hands sank into the dirt. Something moved. She froze. Then a whisper behind her ear, "Don't dig. She's not alone." She spun around. No one there. The light flickered. Beneath the soil, her fingers brushed something cold and metallic. A chain. She pulled it up. Another locket. Not hers. Inside, a photo of Lena as a child. And next to her, Nora. But her eyes had been gouged out in the picture. Nora stumbled backward, clutching the locket. The wind shifted. The trees whispered louder now, as if they knew she was there. Snap! A twig behind her. Too close. She turned, flashlight beam jittering, and saw a shape standing just beyond the circle of light. Tall, thin, almost human but wrong. Its skin looked like bark, dry and cracked. Its limbs were too long. Where its face should have been, there was only a gaping black knot. She didn't scream. She ran. Branches whipped her face as she pushed through the undergrowth. The thing moved with unnatural speed, always just behind her, feet silent on the forest floor. When she reached the house, She didn't stop to look back. She slammed the door and threw the deadbolt. Silence. She backed into the kitchen and tried to catch her breath. Then something scratched the back door. Not a knock, a scrape. Slow, deliberate. She crept forward and peeked through the curtain. Nothing. She turned, and the thing was standing in the hallway, motionless. It didn't move, didn't breathe. Then it tilted its head, and from deep inside its chest, it whispered, "You brought her back. Now you stay." Nora did what any sane person would do. She grabbed a knife from the counter and ran upstairs. She didn't stop to look if the thing followed. She slammed her bedroom door and pushed her dresser in front of it. She curled up on the floor, knife in hand, and waited. It didn't come. Instead, the house began to creak. The walls groaned as if something crawled inside them. A low vibration, like breathing, filled the floorboards. Then she heard a voice, Lena's. It came from inside the wall. "Nora, you left me there." She pressed her ear to the plaster. The whisper grew louder. "It hurts in the roots. I can't sleep. It won't let me." Nora stepped back. The wall began to bulge outward. Cracks spidered through the paint. Then the drywall split, and something emerged. A mouth. Fleshless, jagged, gnashing. It opened wide and screamed. Not sound, but wind. A blast of freezing air knocked her across the room. The locket flew from her pocket and landed inside the mouth. Instantly, the screaming stopped. The mouth swallowed the locket and vanished. Silence again. She sat trembling, her back against the wall. There were things in the house now, things that wanted her. But more than that, something was trying to come through. The next morning, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Nora moved cautiously, knife still in hand. Every corner felt darker than it should. She avoided looking in mirrors. The last time she did, her reflection had smiled when she hadn't. She went into the upstairs bathroom, needing water. The sink creaked as she turned it. Rusty water dribbled out, thick and red as if the pipes bled. On the floor was a small drawer from a vanity, one she didn't remember. Inside were teeth. Not one or two. Dozens. Some were baby teeth. Others were yellowed, broken molars. She counted 47 before she stopped. Each tooth had something scratched into it. Tiny runes, unreadable but pulsing with energy. She dumped the drawer. Something wet slid out with the teeth. A tongue, still twitching. Nora backed away. The tongue flopped once, then went still. Then the faucet began to whisper. "Feed us. Remember, the root is rot. The mouth is mother." She ran. But deep inside her, something stirred. Something that remembered. The attic was locked. It had been since they were kids. But now the lock was gone. The door hung open, waiting. Nora climbed the creaking steps slowly. Dust danced in the shaft of light from the narrow window. Boxes lay scattered, shredded as if something had torn through them. At the far end, an old cassette player sat on a crate. It clicked on by itself. Lena's voice. "Nora, if you're hearing this, I didn't make it out. I tried. I really tried. But the hollow, it remembers. It feeds. It grows through us." The recording crackled. Her voice was panicked now. "Don't trust the trees. Don't trust the shadows. Burn the house if you have to. Just don't let it wake." Click. Silence. Then, over the speaker, a whisper that wasn't Lena's. She lied. That night, Nora couldn't sleep. The whispering started again just after midnight, rising like steam through the floorboards. It seemed to come from beneath the house, deep underground. She went to the cellar. The door hadn't opened in years, but now it swung wide like it had been waiting. Cold air rushed up the steps, thick with the scent of mold and something older. Something raw. Nora descended, flashlight flickering. The concrete walls were cracked, lined with black moss. Water dripped steadily from a pipe overhead, echoing like footsteps. She stepped in something soft. It wasn't dirt. It was hair. A mat of tangled, rotting hair spread across the floor, knotted into the roots that broke through the concrete. Beneath it, the earth pulsed, as if it were breathing. She knelt and pulled aside the strands. A face stared back. It was Lena, eyes open, mouth agape, but not a body, just a mask of her face stretched across the ground. The mouth twitched. Then it whispered, "The roots remember, and now you're part of them." She ran back up the stairs, locked the cellar, and pushed the couch against it. Her hand shook, but the house didn't care. It shifted. The walls pulsed like lungs. Doors moved when she turned away. Mirrors showed her things she hadn't done yet. By morning, there was someone in the kitchen. A man, or something shaped like one. He wore a heavy coat, soaked and dripping, though it hadn't rained. His hands were long, knotted like tree branches. Where his face should have been, there was only twisted bark, a knot the size of fist where the mouth should be. He turned toward her and lifted a hand. From his sleeve fell a ring, her mother's wedding ring. Then he opened the knot. From inside, hundreds of tiny voices spilled out, whispering her name. "Nora, Nora, Nora," she screamed. The man didn't move, just stood there, leaking whispers. Then he was gone, just like that. But the ring remained on the floor, still warm. 3 nights later, she started seeing the girl. At first, it was only in glimpses, a pale figure darting behind trees, reflected in windows that faced solid walls. Then, she began showing up in mirrors. She looked like Lena, or what Lena might have looked like now. But her eyes were all wrong. Too big, too empty. Nora found her standing at the foot of her bed at 3:13 a.m. The girl didn't speak. She just stared. Then she opened her mouth wide, wider than any human should, and let out a low, bone-dry croak. "It's eating me." When Nora reached for her, the girl crumbled into leaves. She tried to call someone. Anyone. The phone rang once. Then static. Then voices, dozens of them, overlapping, urgent, pleading. Then one clear voice cut through. "Don't say its name." Click. Silence. Her phone never worked again. The television turned on by itself later that night. Every channel showed the same thing. A dark forest, pulsing slowly, like a heartbeat. And faintly, just behind the trees, something massive moved. Too big to be seen fully. But she felt it watching. Then the screen cracked. And bled. She woke one morning with blood on her hands. But it wasn't hers. Something was under the skin on her forearm, bulging, squirming. She pressed down, and something hard shifted inside her. She took a knife to it. No pain. She cut the skin, and from the wound slid a seed. Smooth, black and wet. Then another. Then 5 more. She vomited pine needles into the sink. The mirror fogged over. When it cleared, her reflection was smiling. But she wasn't. The townsfolk never came out this far anymore. But someone had been leaving offerings at the edge of the woods. Nora found them strung from the trees like ornaments, bones wrapped in red thread, teeth inside jars of sap, baby shoes nailed to bark. And at the center of the clearing stood the mourning tree. Massive, hollow. Its bark was covered in faces, screaming, silent, frozen. Lena's was one of them. Nora stepped closer. The face opened its mouth. "He's inside the roots now. So are you." Then the tree split open, and the forest swallowed her whole. Nora was underground. She didn't remember falling. One moment she was staring at the mourning tree's gaping trunk. The next she was tumbling through dark soil that shifted like wet fabric. When she landed, the air was damp and sour, like old breath trapped under floorboards. She rose to her feet slowly. Her flashlight was gone. Only a dim green glow lit the space. Not from above, but from the roots. They pulsed with phosphorescent veins, stretching in every direction like arteries of a giant organism. This wasn't a cave. It was something else. Something alive. She walked. The tunnel narrowed and widened without warning. In some places, she had to crawl on her belly. In others, the space opened into vast chambers filled with mounds of clothing, toys, jewelry, offerings, or leavings. She recognized some of it. A yellow raincoat her sister wore the day she vanished. A dollhouse that used to sit in their living room. A photo of her mother, eyes scratched out. In the center of the room sat a wooden high chair. Empty, stained with something black. A lullaby played on repeat from a music box beside it. "Sleep, my root, sleep, my skin. Mother's mouth will pull you in." She turned to run, but the tunnel behind her had vanished. Now there's only one path, sloping down, deeper. Always deeper. The walls pulsed faster. The roots began to twitch. Whispers echoed again, closer this time. They weren't angry. They were hungry. Then came the footsteps. Heavy, wet. Something enormous was crawling toward her, limbs dragging, nails scraping the earth. She couldn't see it, but she felt it, not just behind her, but inside her thoughts. The hunger, the cold affection. It whispered, not in words but sensations, "Come closer. Come home." Nora ran. Her lungs burned. The air grew thick. She tripped, fell, and rolled into a pit filled with dozens of objects, all buried half in dirt. A dozen old rotary phones, ringing faintly. A single baby's crib, rocking. And beneath it, a mouth stretched impossibly wide, as if the roots had grown teeth. The moment she looked into it, she remembered everything she'd forgotten. That she had led Lena into the woods. That Lena had begged to turn back. That Nora had heard the voice in the trees long before Lena screamed. She hadn't run because she was scared for Lena. She had run because something had offered her a deal. Choose one. She had chosen. And now it had come to collect the rest. She climbed out of the pit, trembling. Her hands and knees bled where the roots had tried to hold her. Every step forward felt like an argument against gravity, against fate. The tunnel opened into a vast underground cathedral of trees, gnarled pines growing upside down, their roots exposed in the ceiling above. At the center, a figure waited. Not human, not fully. It stood twice her height, skin of pale bark, veins of sap, face wrapped in rotted lace like a funeral veil. Its fingers ended in sharpened splinters. When it spoke, it didn't move its mouth. "You are the echo. You are the theft. You chose silence," and she screamed. Nora stepped back. "What are you?" The figure tilted its head. "We are the hollow, the gap in the story, the rot between names. You made a hole, and we filled it." She clutched her chest. The wound from the seed pulsed under her skin. "I didn't know." "You did." The room darkened. From the walls, faces emerged, thousands. Mouths moving in perfect sync, screaming, whispering, laughing. A sister for a silence. A locket for a life. You bought your escape with her bones. Nora fell to her knees. "I want her back." The being knelt before her. Its hands hovered just over her face, like it was remembering touch. All things return, but not unchanged. She is yours, but she is ours now too. The figure reached into the ground and pulled out Lena. Not a corpse, not a girl, something in between. Her eyes were black and endless. Her hands dripped sap. Her mouth curled into a smile that wasn't quite hers. "Hi, Nora," she said, and hugged her sister. Nora screamed. For days, or what felt like days, Nora was kept in hollow. Time meant nothing here. The forest above pulsed in rhythm with the roots below. Lena stayed near her, never blinking. She spoke in riddles. The teeth grow first, then the eyes, then the knowing. Sometimes she wept sap. Sometimes she laughed like she was 5 again. The bark-skinned creature returned, offering Nora bowls of pale milk from its own veins. She refused. It didn't insist. But each day, the hunger grew harder to ignore. Nora wandered the tunnels, sometimes screaming, sometimes whispering her own name just to remember she had one. She found a chamber filled with dozens of children, not alive, not dead, sleeping in beds of moss, their skin pale green, their mouths open slightly. Inside each was a seed, rooted in their tongues. She wept. The being found her there. "You think we devour, but we plant. You think we take, but we grow. They are ours now, as you are." Nora grabbed a shard of bone from the ground and lunged. She buried it in the thing's chest. Sap sprayed, burning her skin. But the thing laughed. You stabbed soil and called it conquest. It vanished. Behind her, Lena watched and smiled. She escaped the hollow by accident. She was following the sound of music, her old cassette tape, the one Lena recorded. The sound shouldn't have worked underground, but here it bounced through root and stone like sonar. She climbed a shaft lined with bones. At the top, a trapdoor. When she emerged, it was night. She was in her childhood kitchen. The clock read 3:13 a.m., exactly when she last saw Lena before she vanished. Nora stood still. Had it been days? Weeks? The house had changed. It smelled sweeter now, of rotten flowers. The walls dripped with moisture. Mold bloomed like moss across the ceiling. The furniture was wrong. Too many chairs. None faced each other. And in every mirror, she saw the morning tree. Even the fridge door. She looked outside. The woods had moved closer. Trees stood at the edge of the porch now, watching, waiting. Inside her, the seed pulsed. She didn't know how much longer she'd be herself. The TV was on again. No electricity. No power. Just static but not empty. Faces swam inside the gray noise. So she recognized her father, her grandmother, old neighbors, a teacher who died in 3rd grade, all staring, mouths moving, no sound, until one did speak. A little girl, blonde, pale eyes. "You buried me under the swing set." Nora staggered back. That voice was from a memory she had never told anyone. She had forgotten the swing set, forgotten the game, forgotten the blood. But the seed remembered. It had been feeding for years, long before Lena vanished. Nora screamed and smashed the TV. Behind her, the house exhaled. The power flickered on. Every radio in the house began to play the same message. She is root. She is womb. She is next. The floorboards bulged. Water gushed from the walls. But it wasn't water. It was sap, thick, sweet, golden red. And it was alive. It crawled up her legs, into her mouth, her nose. She fought it, spat it out, clawed at her skin. But it wouldn't stop. It was claiming her, baptizing her. She ran outside. But the trees were already there. The forest had moved. The world ended 10 feet from her porch. Nothing but trees now, whispering, watching. Lena stood at the center of the yard. Hands open, mouth full of seeds. Swallow. Become. Nora ran. Into the woods, where there was nowhere left to hide. Nora ran until her lungs gave out. The forest swallowed her, the trees shifting behind her as if erasing her path. Roots coiled around her ankles, not to trip her, just to remind her they were everywhere. She stumbled into a clearing she didn't remember. Dozens of trees grew in perfect lines, too neat, too deliberate. Their bark looked scorched, their branches bare. But from each one hung an object: necklaces, drawings, teddy bears, stained shirts, brittle photographs. Each tree held memories. Nora approached the nearest one and saw something nailed to it. A school project she'd made in 5th grade, a paper timeline of her family, written in glitter glue and misspelled facts. She moved to the next tree. A snow globe she broke the night her parents fought. The next, her old bike helmet, cracked at the crown. Blood still dried along the edge. The orchard grew darker the farther she walked, and the objects grew worse. A leash from the family dog that disappeared when she was 7. A baby's shoe scorched. A small wooden box she'd forgotten completely. She opened it. Inside, Lena's finger, still wearing the ring Nora had given her that last day. Her body locked up. She couldn't scream, couldn't breathe. Then all the trees whispered at once, in the voices of her childhood friends. "You forget. We remember." Behind her, a tree cracked open. A face formed in its bark. Her own. And it was smiling. She wandered for hours. The forest was endless, circular, recursive. Every path led to another memory disguised as a tree. Eventually, she came to a chapel made entirely of bones. No doors, no roof, just ribs for walls and femurs for benches. Inside, a choir waited. They had no mouths, but they sang anyway. It wasn't a song of joy or sorrow. It was a lament, a dirge, wordless, deep, like a mourning wail echoing through the roots of the world. Nora sat. She didn't know why, but she couldn't help herself. As she did, the air changed. It grew heavy, hot, and from beneath the floor of the chapel, the earth parted like fingers peeling back skin. A root rose from below, twisted and blackened. It held something, a face. Lena's again. No body, just a mask, half rotted, half fresh. The choir swelled. Nora heard her sister's voice cut through the noise. "You fed me to it." Then the singing stopped, and all the mouths opened. Every single one, screaming. Nora fled, but their howls followed her into the trees, long after the chapel disappeared. At some point, Nora stopped believing escape was possible. The forest had no edges anymore, just beginnings and middles, no ends. She entered a glade where hundreds of tongues hung from the branches of weeping birches. Some were still wet, some had dried into leather strips. Each one pulsed when she passed. A breeze passed through the grove, and every tongue whispered a different secret, hers. The first time she lied to her parents. The time she let the neighbor's cat drown in the storm drain. The time she told Lena she'd protect her, and meant it, and failed anyway. As she walked, her own tongue grew heavy. It tasted like dirt. She reached up and felt sap dribbling from the back of her throat. Then a new whisper joined the others, louder than the rest. "You're almost ripe." She fell to her knees and retched. Out came a tooth, then another, then the seed. She held it in her hand, trembling. It was beating. They dressed her in white. The bark-skinned things, tall, slender, sexless, gathered around her as she knelt in a pit of loam and bones. They poured sap down her throat, rubbed ash into her hair, painted her eyelids with blood. Lena watched, silent. The forest watched too, the trees bent inward like an audience leaning close. She didn't fight. Her body didn't feel like her own. The seed pulsed in her hand. Then the high priest stepped forward. His mask was made of baby skulls. He held a crown woven of teeth and pine needles. He placed it on her head and spoke with no mouth. "Bride of the hollow, womb of return, vessel of echo, you are open now." The ground split beneath her, and she was swallowed whole. Darkness, endless. She floated in sap, suspended between memories and dreams. Her skin softened. Her bones groaned. Something coiled inside her. Not a child, not a parasite, a concept, a memory growing roots. She heard whispers in the fluid around her. The voice of the forest. The voice of every lost thing. "Sleep now. You have remembered enough. Let forgetting take root. Let us wear you." She tried to scream, but her mouth was full of petals. She tried to claw out, but her arms had turned to branches. Inside her chest, something opened, a hollow, and from it grew a face. Lena's. It blinked, smiled, and whispered, "Time to come back." She awoke in her childhood bed. Sunlight streamed through the window. Birds chirped. Her hands were clean. Her mouth tasted like mint. The house smelled like coffee and eggs. Downstairs, her mother called, "Nora, come eat before it gets cold." She sat up slowly. The calendar on the wall read, October 12th, 2005, the day after Lena vanished. She stumbled to the mirror. Her face was whole. No sap, no bark, no seeds. She screamed, because she recognized this trick, because it was almost perfect. Almost, but not quite. There was no wind. There were no reflections. The house had no mirrors, because the forest didn't like to be seen. And when she opened the window, there were no trees outside. Only roots, reaching toward the sky, like fingers waiting for someone to fall. Nora refused to play along. She smashed the plates, tore the sheets, set the curtains on fire. But the illusion didn't flinch. Her mother's voice continued from the kitchen, calm and sunny. "Breakfast is getting cold, sweetie." She walked outside into the not world, where trees had been replaced with spires of roots stretching into an ash-colored sky. The sun hovered in place, unmoving. No birds, no wind, just endless quiet. That's when she saw him. The man. Again. Tall, gaunt, wrapped in a rain-soaked coat that never dried. Bark growing out from the open chest of his shirt. Real bark, like something had grown inside him and pushed outward, cracking his ribs like deadwood. His face was not a face, just blank skin, like God had forgotten to carve it. Still, she felt him watching. He pointed to her heart. Then he opened his coat, and inside was a mirror. Not a reflection of her now, but of her as a child, sobbing in the woods the night Lena vanished. A voice spoke through the bark cracks in his chest. "What you forget becomes fruit." He held out a hand, and from it grew an apple. She took it, bit in. Inside was a tooth. Her own. She fell to her knees, coughing blood and sap. When she looked up, the man was gone. And so was the sky. Darkness fell, and the music started. Not music, exactly. Not made by instruments. It was sound stitched from sobs and murmurs, moans stretched into melody, bone flutes whistling through the wind. A parade came through the forest. Nora watched from the edge, hidden behind a root. The hollow walked in ritual. Dozens of them. Barkskin husks, children with flowers blooming from their eyes, women with mouths sewn shut and bellies swollen with eggs made of teeth. Each held something. A memory. A crime. A choice. One dragged a suitcase filled with wedding rings. One wore a veil made of tongues. One pulled a sled carrying nothing but a photo album, page after page of blank faces. Nora's legs moved without her consent. She stepped into the path. The music stopped. All heads turned toward her. Then the priest returned, skull mask cracked, robes soaked in sap. The bride runs, but the soil waits. He reached for her, and the ground opened. Again, she landed in a cathedral of rot. The ceiling was lungs breathing. The floor was tongues pulsing. The pews were bodies sewn together by root and vine. She was not alone. Hundreds knelt before the pulpit, where a figure stood wrapped in vines, arms spread, voice like wind through a corpse's throat. The sermon had already begun. In the beginning, there was hunger. In the end, there will be forgetting. Between them, the bargain. The worshippers wept sap. Nora tried to leave, but her feet were gone. In their place, roots. She was being absorbed, made part of the congregation. The priest pointed to her. Speak, Nora Hastings. Confess. She couldn't open her mouth. It had sealed shut. From her throat rose a voice that wasn't hers. I forgot her. I forgot her screams. I forgot the cold. I forgot the choice. The room shook. The worshippers screamed joyously. And from the altar rose Lena. Grown now. Glorious. Eyes full of worms. Wearing a crown of thorns made from her own bones. Do you remember now? The floor split beneath her again and again. Each time she dropped, it was into another version of herself. A bedroom. A classroom. A forest clearing. Over and over the same moment. Lena calling her name. Lena reaching for her hand. Nora turning away. Until finally, she stopped in a chamber with no walls. No ceiling. No light. Only sound. Dripping. Breathing. Something massive stirred in the dark. Not a creature. A structure. A mouth. Mile wide. Rimmed in pine and bone. Lined with teeth the size of gravestones. It breathed her name. Nora. She was on its tongue. It was speaking her. She clung to the last bit of self she had left. Her name, her memories, her guilt. The mouth whispered, swallow her back into yourself. End this root. She looked into its throat. At the bottom was a girl. Lena, trapped in amber. Still reaching. Still begging. Nora Dove. Inside the throat was silence. She landed in the heart of the hollow. Not a place, but a memory made real. A twisted version of her childhood home, grown from blood and bark. Furniture fused with roots. Photos that bled when touched. The fireplace crackled with teeth. In the living room stood Lena. Fully human now, or close to it. She held the old locket. It glowed. Let me go, she said. Only because you're taking my place. Nora stepped forward. I didn't mean to leave you. But you did. Lena placed the locket on the table. If you take it, you stay. I go. The forest gets what it wants. Nora hesitated, then nodded. She took it, and instantly her skin split. Roots erupted from her mouth, her eyes, her belly. She screamed. Lena smiled sadly. Thank you, and walked away. Nora is the forest now. Not a person, not a soul. She remembers in flashes, smells, sounds, blood cold. She remembers Lena's laugh, her scream, her silence. She blooms every spring, shedding memories like petals. Children who wander too far hear her voice. Sometimes kind, sometimes hungry, The trees lean in to listen. The root remembers. And beneath it all, the hollow whispers. We are full now, until the next forgetting. They say death is quiet. But death, true death, is never quiet. It hums. It gnaws. It keeps time like a metronome. Nora learned this truth somewhere between becoming bark and becoming myth. Somewhere deep beneath the pines, past names and skin, past guilt and screaming. She had forgotten how long she'd been asleep in the roots. She didn't dream. Not the way humans dream. Instead, she remembered things that had never happened, in places that never existed, with voices that wore her name but not her soul. In the dark, she relearned the rhythm of the hollow, the hunger, the seasons of flesh and thought, the rules that governed what could be taken and what must be given. And then, someone called her name. Not a whisper, not a hallucination, a voice, real, human. Nora. She opened her eyes, or whatever part of herself still passed for eyes. She was buried, layered in centuries of soil and silence. But the voice was close. She recognized it. Not Lena, not her own voice. You don't know me, but I think you knew my mother. Her name was Rebecca Harper. Nora twitched. Something inside her body, if it could still be called that, stirred, shifted, screamed. Rebecca Harper. That name. She had lived 2 houses down from the Hastings family when they were children. She disappeared in 1998. She was 10. No one found her. Everyone thought she ran away. She hadn't. Nora had seen it. Had watched Rebecca walk into the woods during a sleepover, lured by a shape that looked like her brother. Nora hadn't followed. She told herself it was a dream. Now this voice. I found your name in my mother's old notebook. She wrote about you. About this place. The hollow. I think you're still in there. The world pulsed. Nora pulled against the roots that held her. For the first time in years, decades, she moved. Above her, the soil cracked, and she remembered how to scream. She woke in a forest that wasn't hers. It looked like whisper pines, but wrong. The sky was too low. The trees were too thin, too tall. The air was sharp with copper and memory. The girl stood at the edge of the clearing, watching her. 17, maybe 18. Pale face, anxious eyes. A journal clutched to her chest. You're real, she whispered. Nora coughed. Her voice tore its way out. What year is it? The girl blinked. 2040. Nora sat hard on the ground. 40 years. She had been inside the hollow for 40 years. And she remembered every minute. The girl's name was Elia Harper. Her mother, Rebecca, had escaped the hollow. Just barely. Not physically. Her body had remained intact. But her mind was shattered. Elia grew up with a mother who spoke in riddles, who carved symbols into walls, who whispered about the root mouth and the tongue of God. People called her insane, paranoid, delusional, but she had left behind a journal. It contained names, dozens. Nora Hastings among them. A map, though fragmented and maddening. Drawings of things no one should be able to describe. The upside-down chapel of spines, the orchard of hanging teeth, the bone choir. And notes. Hundreds of pages of notes. About a ritual, a prophecy, a second opening. Elia showed Nora the pages by firelight. The two of them camped on the edge of the mourning tree's roots. It was dormant now, its bark gray, its face knots closed, the tree itself sunken inward like it was asleep. Elia had come to find Nora for one reason. To open the hollow. Not to release it, but to undo it. Destroy it. Her mother's final journal entry spoke of a seed. A living key. One that had to be cut from the mouth of the tree-born. Elia didn't know what that meant. Nora did. She lifted her shirt. Her belly, once soft and smooth, was now marred by bark scars, concentric ridges that pulsed faintly beneath her skin. A seed was still inside her. Not dead. Dormant. Waiting. Nora met Elia's eyes. You're going to have to cut it out. They waited until dawn. Elia sterilized a knife and fire. Nora laid back, arms crossed over her chest. She didn't flinch when the blade went in. She had felt worse. The seed was the size of a baby's fist, black and glistening, wrapped in fine red roots like veins. When Elia pulled it free, the forest shuddered. Not wind. Not thunder. A groan. A massive organic noise. Elia held the seed aloft, her hands shaking. What do I do with it? Nora took it, closed her hand around it, felt it twitch, and whispered, "We feed it to the mouth." The mouth was still there, underneath the world, beneath the roots, past the screaming trees, through the bone gates. It hadn't moved because it couldn't. It was part of everything, an absence with appetite, a place that shouldn't be, but is. They returned the way Nora remembered. Only now, she wasn't prey. She was part of the system. The forest did not fight her. It let her through. It opened. They walked days without rest. Elia began to bleed from her ears. She heard voices in her sleep, dreamed of being eaten, but she followed Nora, because she believed her, and because she had nowhere else to go. At last, they stood before the mouth again. It pulsed in the dark, a wound in the world. This time, Nora didn't flinch. She stepped to the edge and called out. I remember. The mouth opened. Elia fell to her knees. Nora stepped forward, holding the seed in both hands. I was the bride, the wound, the echo. I want no throne. I want no crown. She threw the seed in. For a moment, nothing. Then, the scream. The mouth recoiled. The roots split. The sky bled. And the forest began to burn. Flames spread like hunger, fast and furious, not hot but righteous. Trees exploded in showers of sap. The ground cracked. Screams rose from beneath, the cries of the forgotten, not of pain, but release. Nora took Elia's hand. Run. They didn't look back, not even when the morning tree split in two, its black fruit falling in silence. Not even when the hollow itself collapsed, folding inward like a dying lung. When they emerged from the forest, it was morning, a real morning. The sun shone through real clouds. Birds sang. The trees were just trees. They never found the mouth again. No matter how deep the holes they dug, no matter how far they wandered into the pines, the hollow was gone. Not asleep. Erased. The forest had been rewritten. No more hunger. No more becoming. No more Nora. She stayed in Elia's guest room for 2 weeks. Never spoke much. Then, one morning she was gone. Left a note. Thank you. If you ever hear whispering, light a match. Don't listen. Burn everything. Elia Harper hadn't heard a whisper in 48 days. She kept count on her kitchen wall, marking each day in red chalk. The lines looked like tally marks on a prison wall, or scars. It helped to have something solid, something visible. The forest didn't leave marks like that. Except it had. The town of Whisper Pines never recovered from the fire. Not because it had been destroyed. The fire hadn't touched a single house. But people changed. Neighbors who once smiled at each other now locked their doors. Kids who used to ride bikes didn't leave their porches. The woods, while smaller now, quieter, less alive, still carried an unshakable weight. People said it smelled different now, like burned sugar and rust. No animals had returned. Birds flew around it. Deer went still at the border. Even bugs were rare. Elia visited the edge once a week. She didn't know why. She never crossed the tree line. She just stood there, waiting for something to come out, or for her to come back. But Nora was gone. As far as Elia could tell, she had become something else. Not quite a ghost, not quite a person. Her note was still pinned above Elia's bed. She read it every night. If you ever hear whispering, light a match. Don't listen. Burn everything. So she kept matches on every surface of her house. She hadn't had to use them. Yet, the nightmares came back on day 49. They weren't the same as before. These were quieter. She dreamt of her mother, Rebecca, sitting in the middle of the forest in a wedding dress made of human hair. Rebecca didn't speak. She only rocked back and forth, holding something in her lap, a bundle of red cloth. When Elia got closer, she saw it wasn't cloth. It was roots, wet, squirming. Inside a small face. Her own. She woke up choking. There was soil in her mouth, and something moving under the bed. Day 50. Elia received a package. No return address. No postage. Just a shoebox left on her front steps. Inside, an audio cassette. No label. No note. A single pine needle. Still wet. She didn't own a cassette player. But her mother had kept one, hidden, tucked behind books and trinkets, as if she knew one day it would matter. Elliot dug it out. It worked. The tape clicked into place and word. And then, Nora's voice. But distant. Fractured. If you're hearing this, it's because it didn't die. It just changed shape. The sound warped. Something buzzed in the background. Not electrical. Insectal. The hollow feeds on absence. Not just people. Truth. Memory. If we don't keep telling the story, it finds its way back in. The tape hissed. Don't remember me. Remember it. Because it will try to be something else. It will wear faces. It will offer choices. It will whisper your name like a prayer. Silence. Then one last line. Barely audible. A whisper from the deep. It's already in the soil. The tape clicked. Stopped. That night it rained. For the first time in months. The water tasted strange. Ellia stood on her porch and watched the drops fall onto the edge of the woods. Wherever they landed, mushrooms bloomed. Red. Wet. Pulsing. The same color as the seed Nora had carried. Ellia backed away and heard it. Just once. A whisper behind her ear, low and tender. Welcome home. Ellia did not sleep after the rain. She sat by the window, the cassette player in her lap, the shoebox still open beside her. The pine needle hadn't dried. If anything, it looked fresher, plumper, like it had just fallen. At 3:13 a.m., her mother's bedroom door creaked open. That was impossible. Her mother had died 8 years ago. Cremated. Ellia had scattered the ashes herself, right at the base of the mourning tree before it collapsed. She gripped the edge of the couch and didn't breathe. The hallway stayed dark. But something moved at the edge of vision, the unmistakable shadow of someone standing still. Too still. No weight. No breath. Then the hallway whispered. Not her name this time. Not Nora. A new word. Seed bearer. She turned on every light in the house. She made coffee. Burnt toast. At 7 a.m., she went outside and walked to the tree line with a red can of gasoline. She didn't wait. She poured it in a wide circle and dropped a match. The fire hissed, crackled, climbed. The mushrooms curled and popped in the heat. The air filled with a scent she couldn't describe, sweet and vile, like sap boiled with old blood. She thought it was over. It wasn't. Behind her, in her own garden bed, a new thing had grown. A plant she hadn't planted. A tall black stem, pulsing, topped by a flower with 5 petals. Bone white. At the center of the flower, an eye. It blinked. She called the university in town. Asked to speak with someone from botany. A man named Professor Denner agreed to meet her after she sent him a photo. He sounded nervous. Too eager. They met in a coffee shop. Denner was tall, thin, pale, with shaking hands and a twitchy eye. He didn't sit, just stared at the image on her phone. This shouldn't exist. Ellia nodded. It does. Where did it come from? I think, she hesitated, a person. He paled further. Have you touched it? I burned the ones in the woods. But this one, it wasn't in the woods. Denner leaned in. I need to see it. They drove together back to her house. Denner didn't speak the whole way. He kept one hand in his coat pocket, clutching something. At the garden bed, he knelt down. He didn't touch the flower, just stared at it. It's not a plant, he said. What is it? Denner looked up at her. It's a memory. She blinked. What? A living, rooted memory. That's why it has an eye. It sees the moment it was created. It is the moment. Frozen. Planted. Elliot took a step back. The eye blinked again. She felt something ripple behind her eyes. A pressure. A presence. Denner stood slowly. It wants you to remember something. She turned, and her mother was standing in the doorway. Rebecca Harper wore her favorite sweater, the green one with the stitched white pine tree across the chest. Her hair was wet. She smelled like rain and iron. Her eyes weren't blank or hollow. They were kind, alive. She smiled. You kept the house clean. Elia's breath caught. You're dead. Not all of me. Denner stepped back, whispering to himself, hands shaking violently. The flower pulsed, and the eye began to cry. Thick sap ran from the petals. Rebecca held out her arms. You don't have to be afraid. We just want to show you. Elia tried to move. Couldn't. Her feet were rooted. The soil opened. The flower wilted. And the garden swallowed her whole. She didn't fall far, but it was far enough. She landed in her childhood bedroom. Only wrong. The walls were made of wood, alive and groaning. The posters wept. The floor crawled. On the bed, the red shoebox. Inside, a heart, still beating. From the walls came voices, her mother's, Nora's, her own, all overlapping, all desperate. You're the last echo. You're the next root. Say yes. And Elia did. Not aloud, not in action, but in thought. She allowed the idea in. The door opened. The forest sighed, and something stepped through. When Elia opened her eyes again, the garden was gone. The house was gone. The town, everything gone. In their place stood a cathedral of root and bone, rising in impossible curves and spirals, its walls pulsing like the throat of something alive. Light came not from sun or fire, but from veins of bioluminescence snaking through the floor. She wasn't alone. Figures moved slowly down the aisles. Some she recognized, others she didn't. All were wrong. There was Nora, or a shape that once resembled her, taller now, gaunter, her skin flaking like peeling bark, eyes like seeds splitting in time-lapse. There was her mother, Rebecca, still smiling, but her teeth were too white, and her breath smelled like soil left too long in the dark. And behind them, the forest priests. 7 of them, cloaked in woven hair, faces hidden behind ceremonial masks carved from the bones of things never meant to walk. Their limbs were too long, their fingers too many. And in the center of the cathedral, mounted on a throne of knotted pine and infant jawbones, sat the mouth. Not as a gaping hole now, but upright, regal. A creature made entirely of absence given form, its body a shifting negative of the world around it, like someone had carved a silhouette into the universe. It spoke without sound, and yet she heard it. You are the air. Elia tried to speak, but no voice came. Only roots. They rose from her throat like vines curling from a cracked well. She gagged, choked, pulled one free, slick, pink, and pulsing, and threw it to the floor. The mouth seemed amused. It turned its eyeless face toward her, and she felt remembered. Not seen, not judged, cataloged, like a book being returned to a shelf. Behind her, the priests began to chant in a tongue older than memory, their words soft and hollow, like leaves scratching at a coffin lid. And still, she could not move. The vines spread under her skin. She felt them twining through muscle, curling around her spine, changing her, preparing her. The mouth's voice poured into her skull like syrup and smoke. We did not make the world. We only found what you buried beneath it. The floor cracked, and from beneath, dozens, no, hundreds of children rose. Their bodies were pale, bark-wrapped, eyes sealed shut with resin. Each one held something, an item from their last day above ground. A teddy bear, a shoe, a glass eye, a locket. They surrounded her and sang, Mother Root, hear our plea. Take the eyes so we don't see. Take the name and take the cry. Let us grow before we die. Their song filled her like fog, like infection. The vines inside her bloomed. She screamed, and sap poured from her mouth. The transformation took hours, maybe days, maybe no time at all. Time in the hollow didn't flow. It seeped. Eventually, Eliath stopped resisting. The vines weren't consuming her. They were revealing her, unmasking what had always been there. She saw it clearly now, how the hollow didn't kill people. It planted them, watered them, harvested their truths. It was a story told in roots and rot, and she was to be its next verse. They brought her to the edge of the cathedral, where the mouth's great tongue unfurled, a platform of bark flesh wet with memory. There, she knelt. The priests encircled her. Rebecca stood behind them, and from her outstretched hand, she offered crown. A halo of thorns grown from Elia's own bones, shaped without permission. It floated above her head. Waiting, the mouth spoke. Once worn, it cannot be undone. You will no longer walk among the forgetters. You will be story, hunger, root. Elia reached up and paused. Some part of her, the final human core, still wanted out. Still remembered sun, friends, laughter, still felt fear. But the crown pulled downward. Gravity twisted. The crown wanted her, and the forest does not make suggestions. She wore it, and the world split. Not broken, unzipped, like a wound being reopened. She now saw everything. Not just the hollow's workings, but its origin. A void left behind after something else died. Something too large, too hungry. The hollow was a scar on reality, and it had learned to live by eating the memories of those who stumbled too close. Each time a person disappeared, it became more detailed, more complex. Each scream turned into a seed, each seed into a hymn, each hymn into a doorway. It needed her to survive its next stage. The mouth was done feeding. Now it wanted to be remembered. It gave her a choice. Take the throne, or become another tree in the orchard of silence. But Elia, now crowned, now opened, made a third choice. She laughed, and the hollow shivered. You've eaten so much, she said, but never yourself. The mouth recoiled. She drove her fingers into her chest and pulled out the roots. All of them. In a scream of agony and memory, she fed the hollow its own blood. The mouth shrieked, a sound of absence collapsing. The throne split in half. The cathedral shook, and behind her, the forest began to fold in on itself. She woke on a hospital bed, a nurse at her side. Her hands were bandaged. She couldn't speak, her throat raw. But she was alive, and the woods outside the window looked normal. Birds, Sunday wind. She cried, silently. That night, a nurse left a tray on her table. A glass of water, a bowl of soup, and next to it, a small, bone-white flower, with an eye at its center. It blinked. Elliot didn't leave the hospital. Couldn't. The flower on her tray wouldn't let her. It didn't move, didn't speak, but its eye never stopped watching. And when she tried to sleep, it followed her. Not physically, in her dreams. She'd close her eyes and open them into a forest made of corridors and gurneys. Every hallway lined with bedpans and foredrips. And beneath the floor, roots moved like veins. She started to hear the hum again, the one her mother used to repeat under her breath in those final years. 3 roots bind the hollow, forgetting, remembering, becoming. It was a nursery rhyme, a protective chant, a warning. She hadn't understood it until now. The hollow wasn't gone. It had simply changed roots. She was the third, the final, the one who would choose. Her body had changed, subtly, horribly. Her reflection was no longer synced with her movements. She'd raise a hand, and her mirror self would hesitate just a fraction too long. She'd smile, and the reflection wouldn't. Sometimes it bled from the eyes. Other times it winked. And at 3:13 a.m., her mirror shattered. From inside it, a single whisper. The seed's not gone, just buried deeper. She went back to the forest. Not because she wanted to, because she had to. There, in the clearing where the mourning tree once stood, she dug with her bare hands for hours. Blood soaked into the soil, until she found bones. Not just one body, many, stacked, woven, all curled around something black and pulsing, a third seed. Larger, throbbing, and carved with runes. When she touched it, the trees screamed, and the world turned inside out. Elia awoke in the pale archive. It was not a place. It was an idea the hollow kept safe, the library of what it had stolen. Every name erased from gravestones. Every scream that went unanswered. Every story that stopped too soon. Here, memories walked. She saw them. People made of mist, repeating moments over and over. A child dropping her lunchbox before disappearing. A father falling into a sinkhole that shouldn't have been there. A girl named Lena holding a locket, calling her sister's name until her voice snapped in two. They all turned to face Elia. Not in anger. In hope. She was the first seed bearer to return. The first to bring a piece of the hollow with her. In her, they saw possibility. A breach. At the heart of the archive, a door stood. Unmarked. Made of flesh and bark. and locked by silence. She approached. The mist memories parted. One by one, they placed hands on her back, on her arms, her face. Not pain. Permission. Elia placed her hand on the door. It opened, and she walked into herself. Inside the door was a church made of nerve and ash. Pews lined with carvings of every name the hollow ever erased. And at the pulpit, a book, bound in living skin. The gospel, not written in ink. In rot. It pulsed as she opened it. Each page told a story, some hers, some not. One was Rebecca's. One was Nora's. One, disturbingly, was Elia's own future. It showed her sitting beneath a great tree, skin barked, mouth open, feeding the next child into the roots. She tore the page out, but the next one was worse. In this one, she saw herself as the mouth. No forest, no throne, just her, a cavity, a hunger calling out to others. The gospel asked her one question. Will you root the next hollow, or burn it? She had no answer. Yet, the forest she returned to was dead. Not in decay, in absence. No trees, no leaves, no life. Just the memory of a forest, flickering in and out of existence like an old tape. Elia walked through it barefoot. The dirt was ash, and the sky above was cracked like glass. Here, the hollow had no power. This was the place before it began. The origin point. She found a single stump in the center, carved with a circle of runes. And beneath it, the bones of the first child. Whoever they had been, the hollow began with them. One moment of fear, one scream unanswered, and rot took root. She knelt, held the bones, whispered a name, any name, just so they wouldn't be forgotten. And for the first time in the entire story, the hollow wept. The mouth opened one final time, not in anger, in grief. It appeared in the hospital hallway where Elia had first awoken. But this time, it wasn't infinite. It wasn't a wound. It was her mother's face, twisted, but familiar. Come home, it said, and she almost did. But she stepped back, clutched the final seed, and placed it in her mouth, not to be consumed, but to be carried back. She stepped into the mouth willingly, and whispered a new gospel, not forgetting, not becoming, but remembering. The mouth cracked, shattered, collapsed into a million black petals, and the forest behind her began to bloom in reverse. Elia returned to Whisper Pines, a different woman. She no longer screamed when she saw eyes in the trees. She no longer flinched at sap dripping from doorknobs, because she now knew the truth. The hollow wasn't a curse. It was a garden. A cruel one, yes, but one that needed pruning. And now, she was the gardener. She bought the old Hastings house, Nora's, boarded it up, sat on the porch every night with a matchbook. And when children wandered too close to the edge of the woods, she gently said, "Not today," because she could hear again now, low and faint, the forest breathing, waiting, but not feeding, because she was watching. Elia Harper rarely slept anymore. She didn't need to, not like before. Sleep had become porous, a membrane between worlds she could no longer keep shut. Every time she drifted off, even for minutes, the hollow pushed through, in voices and smells, in memory-soaked dreams. It didn't punish her. It didn't torment her. Not anymore. Now it used her. She was its final librarian. The house had changed. Not externally. It still looked like the old Hastings home, sagging slightly under the weight of years and whispers, paint peeling in lazy curls from the porch railing. But inside, the architecture of the place had begun to mirror something older, something rooted. Corridors had become longer. Stairs shifted positions. Some nights, she'd wake to find a new door in the hallway, leading to a room filled with things she didn't remember owning. Dolls with missing eyes, wedding veils, cassette players humming songs she'd never heard. The kitchen had grown a second sink. It only dripped sap. She kept it sealed. Mostly. Every Thursday, she descended into the basement with a journal bound in human leather, the one the hollow had gifted her during the rot gospel vision. She didn't write in it. She didn't need to. The book wrote her. Its pages grew new memories each week, curling into existence like dead leaves rising from a compost heap. It cataloged disappearances no one else remembered. Children lost in campsites that never existed, hikers swallowed by sudden holes in forests the state insisted were paved over. Each entry began the same way. What is forgotten becomes soil. Elia read every one, and she remembered. One Thursday, the book gave her a name she did remember. Professor Denner. She hadn't seen him since the flower in her garden blinked. She thought he was dead. The entry said otherwise. Professor Denner never left. He simply planted himself in better soil. The entry came with a map. Elia followed it. It led her to the university, to the old greenhouse near the edge of campus. Overgrown, boarded, chained. She broke in. Inside, the air was wrong, heavy, warm, humming with insect wings and soft breathing from nowhere. Rows of plants stood in metal troughs, each marked with names. Most were unfamiliar, but one stood out. Denner, stage 3 germination. She approached. In the soil, a pod. Transparent. Inside it, Denner's face, eyes closed, lips moving silently, a stalk growing from his open mouth. She leaned close and heard. We don't die. We archive. Elia opened her mouth to scream, but something inside her whispered back. We know. She burned the greenhouse, lit with the matchbook Nora left her. But she knew it wouldn't matter. Roots don't die from fire. They retreat. The next morning, she woke to find a package at her door, wrapped in linen. No note. Inside, a spool of red thread and a severed finger. Nora's ring still on it. She didn't cry. She just sighed. She had a box in the basement for things like this. She added it to the others. The town began to change again. Small things. A boy disappeared while walking his dog. The dog returned alone, chewing a sock that looked too old to be his owner's. Someone began leaving jars of honey outside the sheriff's office, each one containing a single tooth. At night, the wind carried a scent of pine and formaldehyde. Elia knew what it meant. The hollow was testing her, wondering if she'd try to fight it again. She didn't. She watched. She waited. And on the 100th day of stillness, she went to the center of town and whispered her mother's name to the dirt. The trees bowed. The wind stopped. And the ground split open, not violently, but politely, like a door being offered to an old friend. Beneath the town, beneath all of it, the hollow's true roots stirred. Not a god, not a monster, a memory that had gotten too big, a grief that never found rest, a question whispered by every child who vanished without a goodbye. What if no one remembers I was here? And that question had become rot. Beautiful, sentient, longing rot. Elia stood at the edge and said aloud, I remember all of you. The hollow did not smile, but it sighed and let her in. This time, the cathedral wasn't made of bone. It was made of faces, thousands of them, pressed into the walls like fossils in amber, mouths open, eyes closed. Not screaming, not weeping, singing, a low hum, a harmony of names. The archive had found its song. And Elia knew her role now. She would be the archivist. She would not stop the hollow. She would organize it, make it readable, not to justify it, but to make sure no one ever called it a fairy tale again. No more bedtime stories. No more skepticism. The hollow would become a canon. And so, she began to write. Not her voice, but in the third roots. The one that speaks after the remembering. The one that decides what gets passed on. She titled her first entry, Whisper Pines, Volume 1, The First Bloom. Then she lit another match and fed it to the soil. The hollow never wanted the world. It only wanted an audience. Now that it had Elia Harper, it wanted more. Not more soil, more eyes, more memory, more witnesses. Words spread quietly at first, not as rumors, but as questions whispered at the edges of grief. Did your sister vanish near the old pines? Did your father start hearing whispers before the stroke? Did your daughter talk about the lady with the branches for hands before she stopped talking? People came to Whisper Pines. They didn't always know why. Some said they felt drawn, as if something was pulling them by the bones, guiding their dreams. A man from Ohio arrived with only one shoe and a journal full of names he'd never heard. A girl from Winnipeg sleepwalked across the border and was found at the town's edge, reciting nursery rhymes in a tongue her parents swore she'd never learned. A nurse, a mailman, a preacher, a gravedigger, all with the same story. I saw in my sleep. A tree, a mouth, a girl with black eyes humming. Elia welcomed them. Sheniva lit. She offered tea, a matchbook, a question. Do you want to remember or forget better? Most chose memory. Some regretted it. Others stayed. By spring, there were 12. They called themselves the Knotted 12. Each had encountered a version of the hollow, but each experience had been different. One had seen it as a burning library. One as a theater of shadows. One, chillingly, as a children's puppet show where all the puppets were still alive. But the pattern was clear. The hollow was no longer one forest. It was becoming a language. Elia assigned them roles. Not to create hierarchy, but ritual. They met weekly in what was once the Whisper Pines High School gym, now gutted, hollowed. They sat in a ring of root-burned chairs. They brought offerings. One brought a broken pacifier. Another, the lid of a coffin he swore he never buried. A third simply wept and bled into a jar. Elliot took notes. The archive accepted them. And on the 13th week, the ground answered. A tree grew in the center of the gym. Fast, violent, hungry. It cracked through the floorboards, slurping up linoleum like broth. It stood 10 feet tall in seconds, bark black and steaming, its branches humming. At its crown, a single fruit. Small, round, beating, a heart. Still wet, still aware. The 12 didn't flinch. They bowed, and Elio whispered, "Now we know it listens." The government came the following month. Not military, academics, agents in clean coats, calm smiles, asking calm questions. They said they were investigating anomalous soil behavior. Said they'd heard rumors of collective hallucinations. One of them, a woman named Dr. Lang, asked Elia directly, "Is this a cult?" Elia responded with a match, lit it, dropped it onto the gym floor. The roots swallowed it before it hit the wood. Dr. Lang left, but she took a pine cone with her. In the years that followed, the hollow seeded itself globally. In the back alleys of Kolkata, a sewer line burst and left behind a sapling that bled when photographed. In the tundra of northern Canada, a researcher unearthed a page from Elia's archive that had no ink, only sound. In a prison in Marseille, a man dug into his own stomach and pulled out a small root with a tooth growing from it. Governments buried the stories. Whistleblowers vanished. But the Knotted 12 recorded everything. Because that was the pact. No forgetting. Ever again. Elia never left Whisper Pines. She didn't age the same way anymore. Not in body. Not in memory. Every new route, every new name, passed through her first. They asked her once, at a gathering, if she missed her old life. She answered, "No, I missed the shape of grief before it had a mouth." And then, in the archive, a new page grew. Black ink. No title. No date. Just a phrase. The archivist is no longer enough. Beneath it, a question. Who will carry the fourth root? Elia closed the book, blew out the candle, and whispered, "Let them choose." Somewhere, in another country, a child stared into a puddle, and the puddle whispered back. They found the child in a church that had no roof, no doors, no congregation, just dust and silence and a crib made of antlers, centered under what was once a stained glass window, now just jagged teeth of color framing open sky. The priest who discovered her swore she had no shadow, that she didn't cry, that her mouth opened and leaves came out. She was wrapped in cloth soaked with sap, her skin pale as ash, her eyes wide and pitch black. Not empty, not blind, but deep, like she was watching from behind something. She never spoke. Not first. But everyone who looked at her heard the same voice in their head. I was not born. I was planted. The Vatican sent 3 envoys. 2 disappeared. The third returned with his tongue split down the middle and a note stapled to his chest. Faith is just memory with a root system. They called her Anya. It was not her name. She never said her name. She didn't seem to care what they called her. At night, she would sit beneath trees and hum, and every animal within 50 yards would fall asleep and never wake up. She wasn't evil. She wasn't kind. She was next. Word reached Elia in a dream. In the dream, she stood at the edge of a garden that stretched beyond the horizon, each plant a person she'd once known. Some screamed, some begged, most just hummed. The mouth rose from the soil, wearing her mother's face. She is yours now. She is us. You are soil. She is seed. When Elia woke, she knew where to go. She found Anya in the antler crib, just sitting, waiting. The girl looked up and said her first out-loud word. Hello. Elia felt her ribs shift. A root pressed up under her skin. Not painful, just present, like an echo trying to bloom. She knelt. Anya touched her face, and every tree within a mile leaned forward. As if listening, Anya leaned in, whispered one word. 4. Elia brought Anya to Whisper Pines. Not because she wanted to, because she had no choice. The girl didn't walk as much as glide, her feet never quite planting, her presence making clocks stutter and windows sweat sap. The 12 tried to welcome her. They bowed. They offered fruit, teeth, seeds. Anya ignored all of it. She went straight to the archive. The book opened before she touched it. Pages flipped on their own. One stopped. Blank. Then ink appeared. The 4th root cannot be written. The page burst into flame. Anya didn't blink. She slept at the base of the new morning tree, which had grown in silence from the cracked gym floor, fed by names and offerings. The tree wept constantly. Not sap. Milk. Elia tested it. It was human. Type AB. Rich in stem cells. Alive. On the 13th night, Anya spoke again. To no one in particular. The hollow isn't what you thought. It never was. It's not hungry. It's not cruel. It's an instinct. She placed her hand on the morning tree. It eats silence. And with that, she opened her mouth wide. Too wide. And sang. It wasn't a lullaby. It wasn't music. It was reversal. The sound of time peeling backward, of choices unmade, of memories pulled from the grave. Across town, every dead person buried in Whisper Pines began to speak. From their graves, in their coffins, in their urns, mouths full of ash and apology. Some cried, some screamed, some just said names, over and over. One said, Nora. Another, Rebecca. Another, Anya. Elia felt her knees. The archive vibrated. Pages flipped. And in the distance, a new mouth opened in the sky. Not on the ground. Not in the forest. In the sky. Above them all. It began with stars disappearing. One by one, night after night, constellations blinked out, not dim but devoured, replaced by pulsing black knots in the sky, holes that hummed faintly if you listened long enough. People called them sky roots. Astronomers stopped broadcasting. Satellites vanished. Global systems failed. The mouth was expanding, not across ground, but across narrative. It wasn't eating forests anymore. It was eating truth. And all it needed to grow was eyes. The more people witnessed it, the stronger it became. The more they remembered, the more it could shape. This time, silence wouldn't save them. Memory was fertilizer. Anya looked up at the sky mouth and smiled. Not cruelly, but knowingly. She turned to Elia. You're not the librarian anymore. Elia swallowed. What am I? Anya reached out and touched her chest. You're the story now. All across the world, people began drawing trees without knowing why. Children hummed songs no one taught them. Writers lost entire chapters, only to find their books bleeding sap in the margins. In hospitals, newborns were born with teeth. In temples, priests forgot their gods and called out for Mother Root. In the woods where Whisper Pines used to be, the soil opened like a book, and something began to crawl out. Not evil, not divine, just hungry for a story. When the first city vanished, no one noticed. It wasn't bombed. It wasn't consumed. It was rewritten. A mining town in Romania, wiped clean of history, replaced overnight by an orchard that hadn't been there the day before. Each tree bore tags, not of fruit, names. Each one whispered when touched. The locals didn't speak of it. They simply forgot. But the knotted 12 remembered, because they could hear the wind differently now. It didn't whistle. It read. Elia felt the shift before it happened. Her body changed again, not physically but contextually. She became narratively visible. Wherever she went, cameras malfunctioned. Microphones picked up only her breath, her hum. Dogs bowed their heads. She walked with a shadow that no longer matched her movements. The sky blinked when she spoke, and the archive had begun writing her future. She tried tearing the pages out. They grew back, faster, thicker. The hollow didn't just feed on memory anymore. It fed on possibility. Nations fell into confusion. Languages began absorbing new syllables, strange phonemes that didn't belong, that caused nausea if spoken aloud. A new word appeared in multiple alphabets simultaneously. Retail. Scholars couldn't define it. Only Elia knew what it meant. It was the name of the first forgotten child, the one who gave the hollow its shape, the one whose scream became seed, the one whose bones grew the first morning tree. And now, that child was coming back. Not reborn, not resurrected, reauthored. Anya no longer aged. She had stopped speaking altogether. She walked the world now, barefoot, mouth sewn shut, fingers stained black from ink that wasn't ink. People called her the word-bringer. They followed her in silence. Some built altars. Some buried themselves up to the neck and waited for roots. Some began digging books into the earth like corpses. The mouth in the sky grew teeth. Not metaphorically. Teeth. Mile-long. Fossil-white. Hanging above cities. When they whispered, and they did, buildings swayed. Sea level shifted. Electronics reset to clocks no one could read. And every whisper ended with the same phrase, in every language. Tell the story or be unwritten. It wasn't war. It wasn't a plague. It was a new law of reality. That only what was remembered would remain real. Everything else? Composted. The knotted 12 convened for the last time. They met in the ruins of whisper pines, now a forest again, but not natural. Every tree had grown from an object, a broken toy, a locket, a bandage, a tooth. The trees hummed constantly. One of the 12, a man named Ismail, said, "This isn't a forest. This is a bibliography." Elia nodded. "And it's not done." They burned what they could, but the fire only produced new soil. Richer, deeper. The archive laughed through every flame. Elia walked to the center of the forest, where the roots had begun to form a throne. She sat, and the sky split. Not with light, with pages. Torn sheets of reality falling like snow. Each one telling a version of the world that had once been, a version that had already been consumed. She read them all, felt them burn in her blood, and understood. The hollow was no longer a parasite. It was now the author, and she was its pen. Then came the voice behind a hollow, the voice of the thing that made the wound. It was not a god. It was not evil. It was a being who had once lost a child, and had screamed so loudly for so long that its grief cracked the spine of the universe. That scream became the mouth. That loss became the soil. That memory became the hollow. And now it was tired. Not gone, just tired. It whispered to Elia, deep in her skull. "You carry it now, the grief, the structure, the remembering. Tell it forward, or it will rot backward." She asked it, "Can I rest?" And it said, "Not yet. Not until every forgotten name is a tree again." And so Elia began writing, not just with ink, with action, with naming, with witnesses. She sent pages to schools, to churches, to prisons. She taught people how to remember the forgotten properly, with ritual. Not mourning, but rooting. She built a chapel, not of stone, of bark, bone, and branches. Inside, no altar, just soil. People came. They buried objects. They whispered names. They listened for the hum. And every time a story was told right, a new page grew in the archive. And above them, the mouth smiled. Just once. Then closed. Not gone. Just fed. When the first city vanished, no one noticed. It wasn't bombed. It wasn't consumed. It was rewritten. A mining town in Romania, wiped clean of history, replaced overnight by an orchard that hadn't been there the day before. Each tree bore tags, not of fruit, names. Each one whispered when touched. The locals didn't speak of it. They simply forgot. But the knotted 12 remembered, because they could hear the wind differently now. It didn't whistle. It read. Elia felt the shift before it happened. Her body changed again, not physically but contextually. She became narratively visible. Wherever she went, cameras malfunctioned. Microphones picked up only her breath, her hum. Dogs bowed their heads. She walked with a shadow that no longer matched her movements. The sky blinked when she spoke, and the archive had begun writing her future. She tried tearing the pages out. They grew back, faster, thicker. The hollow didn't just feed on memory anymore. It fed on possibility. Nations fell into confusion. Languages began absorbing new syllables, strange phonemes that didn't belong, that caused nausea if spoken aloud. A new word appeared in multiple alphabets simultaneously. Retail. Scholars couldn't define it. Only Elia knew what it meant. It was the name of the first forgotten child, the one who gave the hollow its shape, the one whose scream became seed, the one whose bones grew the first morning tree. And now, that child was coming back. Not reborn, not resurrected, reauthored. Anya no longer aged. She had stopped speaking altogether. She walked the world now, barefoot, mouth sewn shut, fingers stained black from ink that wasn't ink. People called her the word-bringer. They followed her in silence. Some built altars. Some buried themselves up to the neck and waited for roots. Some began digging books into the earth like corpses. The mouth in the sky grew teeth. Not metaphorically. Teeth. Mile-long. Fossil-white. Hanging above cities. When they whispered, and they did, buildings swayed. Sea level shifted. Electronics reset to clocks no one could read. And every whisper ended with the same phrase, in every language. Tell the story or be unwritten. It wasn't war. It wasn't a plague. It was a new law of reality. That only what was remembered would remain real. Everything else? Composted. The knotted 12 convened for the last time. They met in the ruins of whisper pines, now a forest again, but not natural. Every tree had grown from an object, a broken toy, a locket, a bandage, a tooth. The trees hummed constantly. One of the 12, a man named Ismail, said, "This isn't a forest. This is a bibliography." Elia nodded. "And it's not done." They burned what they could, but the fire only produced new soil. Richer, deeper. The archive laughed through every flame. Elia walked to the center of the forest, where the roots had begun to form a throne. She sat, and the sky split. Not with light, with pages. Torn sheets of reality falling like snow. Each one telling a version of the world that had once been, a version that had already been consumed. She read them all, felt them burn in her blood, and understood. The hollow was no longer a parasite. It was now the author, and she was its pen. Then came the voice behind a hollow, the voice of the thing that made the wound. It was not a god. It was not evil. It was a being who had once lost a child, and had screamed so loudly for so long that its grief cracked the spine of the universe. That scream became the mouth. That loss became the soil. That memory became the hollow. And now it was tired. Not gone. Just tired. It whispered to Elia, deep in her skull. "You carry it now. The grief. The structure. The remembering. Tell it forward, or it will rot backward." She asked it, "Can I rest?" And it said, "Not yet. Not until every forgotten name is a tree again." And so, Elia began writing. Not just with ink, with action, with naming, with witnesses. She sent pages to schools, to churches, to prisons. She taught people how to remember the forgotten properly, with ritual. Not mourning, but rooting. She built a chapel, not of stone, of bark, bone, and branches. Inside, no altar, just soil. People came. They buried objects. They whispered names. They listened for the hum. And every time a story was told right, a new page grew in the archive, and above them, the mouth smiled. Just once, then closed. Not gone, just fed. Elia Harper stared at the blank page in her hand. No ink, no texture, just flat, unending white, the kind of white that didn't reflect light but absorbed memory. Her name had appeared on it for a second. Then it faded, letter by letter, until nothing was left but a smudge of recognition. The child who brought it stood barefoot in her garden. No dirt clung to him, no wind disturbed his hair. His eyes were not human. They were edits waiting to happen. Unwritten potential, syntax in the shape of bone. She whispered, "What are you?" He smiled. It was not a child's smile. "I'm the red pen in your margins." The hollow was never about feeding. It was about version control. Now that the archive had recorded the grief, the screams, the rot, the rituals, it was time to revise, refine, delete. And that required an editor. The librarians came at dusk. All 12. Their tattoos itched. Their eyes bled softly. One by one, they circled the child. He didn't run, didn't blink. He held out his blank page like it was a gun. No one moved. Then Orwin spoke. "You can't rewrite her. She's the reason this exists." The boy replied, "Exactly." The grove shifted. The soil heaved. From beneath the old mourning tree, the mouth returned, not gaping now but closed. Calm, a presence, not a threat. It no longer needed to devour. It had become a publisher, and now it waited to approve the new draft. Elias stepped forward. The boy stepped back. "You want to erase me?" He shook his head. "You're already erased. I'm here to decide if you deserve a footnote." The wind stilled. Time paused, not in physics, but in story structure. This was no longer reality. This was epilogue territory. The stakes weren't survival. They were interpretation. Elia knelt and laid her hands on the soil, spoke directly to the hollow. "Is this what you are now? A literary machine?" The trees didn't answer, but the sky darkened, and the stars rearranged themselves into letters. Words. A sentence, written across the cosmos. Only the remembered are real. She closed her eyes, sank deeper, not physically, structurally. She entered the archive not as a reader, but as text. She found herself in a room made of pages, each one a version of her life. One where she never met Nora. One where she stayed human. One where she was buried alive by her mother. One where she never found the seed. One where she never left the house. She touched each page and felt it scream. All her could-have-beens, wailing for validation. She tore them down, one by one, until only one page remained. Her first scream, a memory of when she was 5, lost in the woods for 6 hours. No hollow, no magic, just terror. That was where the root took hold. That was the true seed. She pressed her hand to the page and bled. Outside in the grove, the boy gasped. He stumbled. The page in his hand curled. Not burned, not vanished, just changed. New ink formed. Her name, bolder this time, with a title above it. Elia Harper, primary source. The mouth opened, but this time it sang. Every tree in the grove bloomed at once. Not fruit, not flowers, books, bound in bark, pages of root and memory. The librarians fell to their knees. The boy looked up at Elia and whispered, "You're not a story anymore." She stepped forward, cracked the blank page in half. "Good. I'm a genre." The sky shattered. Not literally, but conceptually. Every person who had ever touched the hollow, heard of it, dreamed of it. They all felt something shift, as if the universe had accepted a rewrite and approved the changes. Reality blinked, then updated. In schools, children began learning a new subject: grief structures and narrative root systems. In graveyards, people planted stories instead of flowers. In prisons, entire wings were transformed into storytelling groves. And in the center of whisper pines, Elia sat beneath a tree made of herself. Her body no longer moved, but her mouth whispered constantly. The hollow no longer needed to hunt, because it had been canonized. No longer just a wound, now a discipline. The editor vanished, not punished, just fulfilled. There was nothing left to cut, Only stories to remember, and storytellers to root. Lecture transcript. Department of Mythocartography and Structural Grief. Third Era Hollow Studies. University of New Pines, Global Archive Ring. Date, 241 years after the bloom. All stories grow toward the same soil. The difference is whether you plant them or fall in trying to forget them. Attributed to Elia Harper, final librarian. The lecturer is late. Students murmur. The sunlight filters through the glass dome of the Groveplex, casting prism light across the wooden floor. In the center of the circular auditorium grows a tree. Not a symbolic one, a real one. Alive, breathing, roots threading through the benches, bark inscribed with names, not of donors, but of witnesses. Every student touches it before sitting. It's tradition, reverence, insurance. Then, finally, the doors creak open. A woman enters, not young, but timeless. Hair coiled in living vines, eyes milky with sap and history. She walks with bare feet, each step leaving faint outlines of text on the floorboards, words that vanish seconds after forming. She does not carry notes. She is the lecturer. Today, she says softly, we discuss the final years of the Canon Route expansion, the moment when the Hollow stopped whispering and began publishing. She pauses, looks to the students. Can someone recite the 3 root eras? A boy in the front, no older than 17, stands. First, the consumption era, when the Hollow was raw grief, pre-linguistic and unstructured. Second, the archive era, defined by Elia Harper's stewardship, when memory became currency and the mouth was made into scripture. Third, the canonization, when the Hollow became a recognized metaphysical ecology and its structure was adopted into legal and narrative systems. Good, she says, but incomplete. She taps the bark of the archive tree in the center. There's a fourth era, unofficial, unwritten, still growing. A hush falls over the room. Some students smile nervously. Some shift. All of them know the rumors. That the fourth root is alive. That it's chosen a new name. The lecturer continues. Elia Harper's death was not marked. No tomb. No ritual. No archive entry. Not because she vanished, but because she became root-encoded, a phenomenon we now call full narrative integration. She walks a slow circle around the tree. Her story became too powerful to end, too known. The archive no longer keeps her in the pages. It keeps her in the space between them. She stops, looks at the youngest student in the room. You've dreamed of her, haven't you? The girl stares, nods. She never speaks, the girl whispers. But when I wake up, there's always soil on my pillow. The lecturer smiles. Good. That means she trusts you. Another student raises a hand. A question. Is it true that grief can still rot? The lecturer doesn't speak for a long time. Then, everything can rot. Even love. Even memory. Especially reverence. She turns to the window. Outside, the grove is in full bloom. Dozens of archive trees. All humming. Each one planted from a moment someone remembered on purpose. She addresses the class one final time. What Elia taught us, what the Hollow is, was never about monsters, or gods, or horror. It was about consequence. That forgetting isn't neutral. That silence is soil. And that the only thing more dangerous than grief is leaving it alone. The bell rings. But no one moves. The tree's roots are glowing faintly now. Some students cry. Some stare. One simply walks to the archive tree and whispers a name. The bark splits open. A new page grows. Another witness. Another root. Another story remembered. Far away, on another continent, a child is born, with bark around his left hand. He cries in a rhythm known only to librarians. A nurse hears the hum. It sounds like a book being opened. And somewhere underground, the Hollow smiles. Not in hunger, not in grief, but in completion. There's a forest in no one's map. No coordinates, no signs, no path. But it waits. It always has. And on the final morning, a woman with white hair and soil-colored eyes walks to its edge. She carries nothing but a seed. And her name, The trees remember her. They hum softly, not like wind, not like music, like breath, like a mother shushing a child, like the space between prayers. Elia Harper steps inside. She is older than she ever should have been, but the hollow has bent time around her like bark around rot. It has kept her preserved, not with mercy, but with purpose. Now, the purpose is fulfilled. She is no longer the pen. She is no longer the page. She is the final period. She walks barefoot. The roots rise to greet her, not to claim her, to escort her. Every tree leans back as she passes. Every flower closes its petals in reverence. The forest is quiet, not dead, listening. She finds a stump, the one where it started, the stump of the first morning tree, where she once dug and found bones, where she screamed for the first time in the hollow's voice, where Lena was buried, where Nora left, where her mother's last whisper sank into the dirt. She kneels, places the seed in the center of the stump, and speaks, only once. Thank you for remembering me. The earth opens, but not wide, not with hunger, with welcome, like a friend opening their arms. Elia does not fall in. She lies down. The roots cradle her. The soil covers her gently. She closes her eyes and dreams for the first time in years. And as she sleeps, the seed sprouts. A new morning tree grows from her ribs. Its bark is pale gold. Its leaves shimmer like memory, and its hum carries across continents. A single phrase, what we root, we remember. Across the world, archived trees bend toward the sky. Children recite her name in the same breath as seasons. The librarians gather one final time. They read her story aloud from the beginning. No one adds to it. No one edits. The page remains whole. The hollow no longer devours. It no longer sings. It simply waits, as it always has, as it always will, in forests, in silence, in the space between memory and myth. It waits, and it whispers, you are not forgotten. The end. Whisper pines,